Welcome to Money Making Sense, the show that talks about all things money. If it affects your life in any way whatsoever, we're going to talk about it. Today, we're talking about potatoes. Potatoes actually affect our lives in a big way. I have joining me Lisbeth Lauderback. She is the curator of archaeology at the Natural History Museum, and also Bruce Pavlik. And you're the director of conservation at Red Butte Gardens, which is near the it's at the University of Utah. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about, you have this really cool new, well, it's new to us in the modern day, but you've got this potato that is 10,000 years old, or a tuber, I guess is the proper name for it. But tell me a little bit about this potato. Where did we find it? How long has it been around? Who used it first? Why do we care? Mm-hmm. All sorts of questions.
Well, it all started when we were excavating a site in southern Utah, it's North Creek Shelter, and we were interested in what humans were eating in the past 10,000 years. And one way to find that type of evidence is to look for plant residues on ancient stone tools, such as manos and metates. And so when we did that, we found some starch grains that looked like potato starch grains. And at first, we weren't quite sure why we were finding potato starch grains on these tools from southern Utah. But it turns out that there is a native potato that grows right here in Utah. And where the site is located, which is in Escalante, that used to be called Potato Valley, after this potato. So we did some botanizing on the property. This property is owned by Joette Marie Rex and her family. And we happened to find a population of this potato right in front of the archaeological site.
Oh, my gosh.
So we kind of put two and two together, and we identified the starch grains as this species. It's Solanum jamesii, the four corners potato. And the stone tool dated to over 10,000 years ago.
Oh, my gosh. Now, for any of my listeners who don't know, I have an international listenership. The Four Corners is what we call, there's four different states in the U.S., Utah, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado.
That's right.
They all meet up and make four perfectly square corners. You can actually stand with 1 foot in one state, 1 foot in another, and then bend over and put one hand in a third state and and your other hand in the fourth state. Exactly. So that's what they call it, Four Corners.
That's right.
Region. And that's where you found this potato.
Yeah, and that's where it currently grows today. So it still exists today. Oh.
Okay, so my history that I know of as, of course, and I'm Irish, and so we're very proud of our Irish, potatoes, and not so proud of the famine that happened back in the 1800s. But do we think now that potatoes maybe started in North America or this continent and then got shipped over to Europe, and then now it's made its way back in the 1800s? Or is this just a different species of potato?
Well, the potato that we know from the market is a species that actually originated in South America.
Okay.
And it's not a wild species there. It was actually engineered by humans approximately 7,000 years ago. And we think it's a hybrid between two wild species, at least two wild species. And the history is a little bit difficult to tease apart, but that is Solanum is the genus name of a large category of plants, but the potato that we know is Solanum tuberosum, referring to the large tuber. And virtually all the potatoes that you see, the reds, the yellows, the whites, the russet, all those are derived from Solanum tuberosum, and that was brought from South America to Europe in around the 17th century, 17th, 18th century.
Okay. That was my understanding, was that the potato was found in the New World, taken to Europe, and then it was kind of brought back, especially when, things got commercialized over here, and we've got, we call it the Idaho russet, things like that. And it's a big industry. Potatoes are big industry, big money.
It's a huge industry. It's worth almost $4 billion in just the sales of the potatoes, not the products. So what the farmers raise is worth about $4 billion a year, and we're talking about something like 44 billion tons of potato raised in the U.S. every year. That's from a 2016 summary from the USDA. So it's a huge amount of biomass, of starch that's created from a single species, and again with South American origins.
Okay, so with the potato market being so big, and these are huge potatoes, and we've now found these Four Corners potato, which since we're videoing this, maybe we can show the size of this potato.
So yeah, these are the tubers.
So you'll have to show it up. Yeah. Those are, and look at the side, like that's a pen. Okay, now I'm sorry, but I need to use a lot of those to get on my Thanksgiving table to feed even a family of 4. So what are we thinking that we're going to be able to do with that size potato?
So what's really unique about this species is that, and so the samples we brought in today were propagated and grown in the greenhouses at Red Butte Garden. We planted one tuber, so one potato, in March, and within one growing season, so we just harvested these last month, they produce over 400 more tubers. So yes, they're small, but they are incredibly prolific.
So let's put that into context of if we're looking at Idaho russet potatoes, if we planted one plant of an Idaho russet, how many potatoes am I going to get out of that?
It depends on the growing conditions, but generally those are large and fewer potatoes. So we may be talking about 6, 7, 8, 9 from a single plant.
Okay, so let's just be generous and say we get 9 potatoes off of one Idaho russet plant. Now they're big, and you're going to feed a few people, but yours is 400. You got 400.
Well, actually, even more sometimes. So we have a single bag here that contains about 2.2 pounds of these tiny potatoes created in about 8 months.
Wow.
And so it's
oh my gosh.
incredibly,
I saw that.
incredibly productive. Maybe not as much as our Solanum tuberosum,
Okay.
but this is a plant that is wild, and so it has different priorities. It doesn't want to create few large potatoes because if something digs them up, that's sort of the end of the story for that plant, right?
Right.
So why not make many and send them out through the habitat where they're all harder to find? And that's what happens in a wild situation. So the fact that these are small is just reflecting the fact that they're really adapted to living in the wild. But they have this potential of being large. And our colleagues at the USDA Potato Gene Bank, which is in Wisconsin, are looking at this and other native potatoes, and they're doing experiments where they're hybridizing them, and they're looking for genes of larger tubers. So all that genetic variation does exist. It's just that we have to uncover it.
Okay. Well, I actually, we need to take a little break, and that's a good place because when we come back, I want to discuss the differences between hybridization and the genetically modified products, which I am greatly against. So, bad thing. We'll be right back. Lisbeth Lauderback, she's the curator of archaeology, and also with Bruce Pavlik.